Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for attending today's webinar on risk management and more specifically how to manage these various risks so that they can be transformed into opportunities. My name is Rick. I'll be acting as moderator for today's presentation. We are going to go ahead and get started in just a second. I would first like to say we are very excited to have both Kelly Ernsdorf and Larry Redd as our presenters today. For those of you who do not know, Kelly works as Director of AssetWorks Enterprise Asset Management, or EAM solution, from one of our offices in Spokane, Washington, and Larry has been in the transportation industry for many years and is also a subject matter expert on today's topic. Larry's experience spans from engineering to working with various state DOTs to improve asset management operations. So it's very safe to say we feel very confident all of you will learn something valuable today about how to better manage risk. So thank you, Kelly and Larry, for joining us. Just to give everybody another quick heads up here, the microphones have been muted. So in the event any of you have any questions at any time during the presentation, you are welcome and encouraged to use the WebEx chat tool. All right, so this should appear right on your screen, and it looks like a little chat icon. It acts as an instant messaging tool, so please feel free to use the WebEx chat tool to enter any questions during the presentation. Make sure that you address your questions to host, which will be me, and I will be more than happy to field and relay them to our presenters at the conclusion of the presentation for a brief Q&A session. All right, so with that said, I think we are ready to get started here, Kelly. If it's all right with you, I'm going to pass you control. All right, and whenever you're ready, you can share your desktop. I will give you confirmation that we're able to see the presentation.
Okay.
Okay, looks good, Kelly.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our educational webinar on risk management and transforming risks into opportunities. How you think about risk likely depends largely on your area of responsibility. If you are a fleet manager, then you care about the breakdown risk of vehicles. And if you're a manager and your staff drives vehicles in performing their job functions, then you probably care about driver performance. If you're a highway asset manager, then you would care about MAP 21 and the health of your highway network. If you're a safety manager, then you care if your employees have the proper training and safety equipment to safely do their jobs. As a public works director, you would care about the condition of your streets, signs, signals, and sidewalks to ensure the safety of the public. All of these are types of risks to consider, and it varies depending on who you are and what you do. In the majority of cases, assets are involved, so properly managing your assets and considering risk when developing your asset management plan is a key component of risk management, regardless of who you are and what you do. For today's webinar, we'll start with a risk management overview and how it affects asset management. Then we'll move into just describing a specific type of risk involving drivers of vehicles, and then shift into a discussion around a few potential mitigation tools and finish up with a session of questions and answers. Our objectives today include these items here regarding the different aspects of risks, how they affect asset management planning, and how you can apply risk management to your job, but also to encourage you to think about risks and how they may apply to you and how risk management can help your organization. We do have a few terms that may come up today. If we say TAM or TAMP, that generally refers to Transportation Asset Management or a Transportation Asset Management Plan, and those terms are generally used if you're a Department of Transportation, such as a DOT, or some other type of transportation-related organization. If you're a transit, the T often refers to transit instead, so that would be a Transit Asset Management Plan. MAP 21 is the Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century Act, which is a funding and authorization bill to govern United States federal surface transportation spending, passed by Congress on June 29, 2012, and signed into law on July 6 of 2012. A PMS is a software system focused on pavement management, and an MMS is a software system focused on maintenance management. So to kick things off, I would like to introduce Larry Redd. Larry has been in the transportation business for many years. He was a design engineer with Boeing Aircraft Company on the 767 airplane program and eventually became senior manager of strategic sourcing with Cessna Aircraft Company. In this role, Larry was responsible for the quality, reliability, and cost of all system components and major assemblies purchased for Cessna's production lines of jet aircraft. During these experiences, he developed several benchmark engineering and business management methods in the areas of risk analysis, supplier management, process reengineering, quality, and strategic management. In the past 10 years, Larry has worked with several state DOTs, helping them develop their management processes and information systems in order to work toward their visions in asset management. In addition, he worked with Israeli National Roads, helping them define their project selection processes, as well as developing system requirements for their integrated planning system. Larry has a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Purdue University and is a licensed professional engineer in the state of Colorado. So, Larry, take it away.
Thanks, Kelly. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thanks.
And I'd also like to thank AssetWorks for having this session today, and thank you all for tuning in. And so let's go to the next slide, I guess. I just wanted to talk a little bit about process for a second, and I will revisit all these items throughout the talk here, but it's always good to have a defined process, one that the organization is familiar with or knows. It's been formalized, especially for complex topics, and I think we could all agree that risk analysis and risk management is probably a complex enough topic. And it's good to have discipline and consistency in a process and an approach to these types of topics, and repeatability is an important thing, because when you get into continuous improvement and more sophisticated types of analysis, then it's important to be able to repeat your analyses year after year and improve things. It's important to have something to start the dialogue. If the organization is, let's say, less mature in the risk management arena, then being able to get ideas and some structure to the approach on the table and guide the process, so guide the methods and so forth. So as I mentioned earlier, it's important to formalize this search for opportunities, because they are opportunities. It's not always just downside, but it's part of the organization struggling to make the best investments, which may not necessarily be performance related. It may be risk related, but we'll talk about some of these topics throughout. Next slide. So having a good process is all that's necessary, right? The definition of risk, which was kind of on the previous slide, is about the uncertainties of reaching your goals. So that defines risk. And well, obviously you have to know what your mission is and what your objectives are. In the transportation world, it's typically around minimizing maintenance and construction ongoing costs and maximizing safety and dealing with mobility. So those are typical goals. The process steps you've just seen are fairly standard, but kind of once you've got those under your belt or written down, what else is there? You know, what is there to having a good approach to risk management and discovering opportunities? And I've had the chance in the last several years to work in the risk management area. Actually, my aircraft industry had a lot to do with risk management, and I could talk all day on that, but we're talking about transportation today, and the multiple levels that you can view risk from the enterprise, from the program level, from the project level. You know, what is your context of risk, including project delivery, and asset classes, the variety of asset classes that are involved in transportation, how to view things with a common process and exercise this process and define and discover what your various opportunities could be, and lastly, evaluating and packaging solutions, candidate solutions, whether it's mitigating risks or whether it's just planning to respond to various types of events. So I'll try and talk about some of these rules of thumb and lessons learned over a pretty good variety of topics on risk management. Next slide. So some of the subtle questions that I'd like to get into are shown here. Event types. There's all kinds of risk event types, and so one question is how do you best go about identifying an exhaustive set of events that could happen, that could threaten your objectives and goals of your organization? How would you comprehensively define strategies associated with those event types? There may be more than one good candidate strategy for each event type. And also, back on the types of events, there's rare events and there's more frequent events. There's catastrophic events, there's not so catastrophic or even just annoying types of events. And do you want to mitigate them? Do you want to accept them? Those types of questions go into the types of strategies you might want to consider. When you're working through your organization on identifying opportunities and potential strategies, how to have effective discussions with the various parts of the organization is very important. And there's creativity sometimes involved, and you want people to talk and bring ideas forward. And so having those effective discussions is pivotal to a successful risk management program. Somewhere in the mix, you have to evaluate not just event by event, but perhaps there's groups of events or geographic areas that are involved in various types of risks. And so how do you package the solutions to those issues and prioritize and eventually make investments? And the last bullet there has to do with considering risk-based opportunities along with performance-based opportunities. And this is an important feature in transportation asset management because it's charged with considering all types of opportunities, including the importance of risk and performance considered together. So next slide. I just had one more thought back on, we don't have to go back, but I wanted to mention that in considering various types of risk events, extremes matter, and that is, about a year ago, we had a topic come up of can't we just define an average culvert to consider the issues related to thousands of culverts in a given state, and that doesn't work because the extremes matter, the location matters, and what can actually happen in a given situation matters. So being able to consider the range of probabilities of various types of events is very important. I want to move on to map 21 and give a little background on transportation asset management planning. It involves considering risk in asset management decisions, not just performance, but risk-based. And I had the opportunity to help on the Colorado DOT asset management plan. And for example, they considered 3 levels of risk at the agency level, program level, and project level. Some agencies don't consider all levels of risk. They would prefer to focus on, for example, the agency level risk. So to each their own, and every situation is different, and so that could be what could be appropriate for one agency might be a different thing for another agency. Another thing I wanted to talk about, though, was asset classes and other dimensions of risk. having these things have different mitigation strategies, different asset management strategies in general. That is, fleet considerations are certainly different than ITS, not just for the obvious reasons, but some asset classes may have more response-related strategies that are best for them. Some asset classes or situations may have direct mitigation or being able to preclude the events or minimizing the impacts of given risk events associated with them. So every situation is different, and the approach to risk management, risk analysis needs to be able to feel those differences. One other thought on the variety of risks across a transportation agency. One thing I think that a good set of discussions will uncover is some things that we discovered in the last couple of years of, is it really a risk or is it just a business trade-off? And that is having to come back to the definition of risk. It's uncertainties in reaching your goals or objectives. But and I know there's gray areas here. That is, there is never no risk in anything. But we make pavement decisions largely based on current pavement conditions or projected pavement conditions and material science and so forth, and do the best we can in terms of choosing future pavement projects. There's other decisions such as buying equipment versus leasing equipment. Are those risk-related decisions or are they just good business trade-offs? So once again, I think good, healthy discussions of what is risk in certain contexts will keep you focused on, are you really doing a risk analysis or not? And so I wanted to mention that. Next slide. So I just wanted to point out what are some of the key, and I mean really high level, steps in a transportation asset management plan and the development of the plan. Obviously, anybody that's written a big report or a book or what have you knows the importance of outlining, but it's important to get the flow right and make sure that the supporting research is done and everything is great along those lines. A gap assessment is traditionally part of the diagnostics in the research, and that is identifying potential areas of improvement within the organization and capabilities. It's usually all about people, processes, and technology and things to improve upon. Risk management is a large part of current plan developments, and I'm going to include a short excerpt from the Colorado DOT risk-based asset management plan. It's available in the document, but I'm just going to show a quick picture of it here to make some points about developing a risk register. And then actually producing the document typically involves what is the current situation, and then the to-be or the vision, once the gaps are addressed, what the future could look like. So those are just some of the major aspects of plan development. Next slide. So the reason for showing a glimpse of a risk register, I apologize for the granularity of this picture. I know better, but I still wanted to talk about this. Risk register is certainly a good start to risk management. It gets the dialogue going simply by filling the thing out, and it has the opportunity to identify various types of risk events and their likelihood, and then score the potential the potential impacts of that that event. And this approach, though, is risk event specific, and that is it's a good start, but it does form the basis for more sophisticated types of analyses. You'll hear the words system risks sometimes, and that sometimes has to do with the interdependencies between event types. And I'd be happy to speak with anybody that would like to discuss that further. And other issues that aren't really discussed in a risk register have to do with the final packaging of solutions, and can things be viewed from a site-specific context, or a corridor context, or perhaps a regional or state context. So some of these items of interdependencies and packaging and so forth, and how to evaluate these things can stem from what begins with a good risk register development. Next slide. So after the TAM plan is done, that's the opportunity to perhaps implement some of the improvements or gaps that were identified in the TAM planning and research that went into the plan. And I just listed some typical ones there, but certainly if risk is a large part of the considerations in the development of the plan, there'll be continuation of that theme. And then asset management is all about making good investment decisions, and scoping and optimizing projects is part of that ongoing process of making sure those objectives in the chosen investments are delivered on. And then project delivery itself, which is an area of risk, but also helps ensure that chosen investment opportunities are actually physically delivered. And then what we call strategic management is in the ongoing sense of continuous improvement and learning, and being able to set targets for performance and revisit those targets. Are they good? Should they be adjusted? What does that all mean from a year-to-year basis? And it involves look-back analysis and plan versus actual type of analysis and so on. Next slide. So usually as part of the ongoing effort to further develop a risk register, I've just shown a few additional columns there of where an initial register with just scores for each of the event types, adding the ability to consider various strategies for those event types, and then the benefits and costs. There may be multiple risk management strategies for a given row there, for example, and that is all the way from doing nothing and perhaps responding to a certain risk event to transferring the risk from what it is that's taking the brunt of that event, that is the impacts, how they're absorbed, if there's a way to shift that to still dealing with the risk, that's what we call transferring risk, or precluding the impacts of a given risk event type by active risk mitigation. So it would be healthy to perhaps consider, if they exist, at least a couple of or maybe multiple mitigation options for each type of event. And then in order to enable evaluation and selection of the highest opportunity risks in the that your organization faces, costs and the costs and the benefits are important to have there. That is, the cost of making an investment in risk management, and the benefit would typically be to be able to reduce the risk score. That is, a benefit in terms of 50% in reducing a risk score of 14 would bring it down to a 7, and then the costs associated with that would give you an ability to calculate a benefit to cost of taking action or some risk management strategy in that event type. Next slide. So in digesting the results of a first round risk register, I've just shown some typical analysis here, and in this case there were greater than 100 event types that were examined, and you know, it's not just this picture, but there's lots of ways to slice and dice results of a thorough risk analysis. And I'll have to say, and I've known this for years, that Excel is a wonderful thing. But I didn't want to bore you today with a lot of charts and graphs, but the point is to be able to, the key is to be able to identify what the priorities are that the organization should invest in. And obviously there's all kinds of other analysis that would come into play, and that is, as I mentioned in the last slide, the ability to look at the costs and benefits of applying one strategy versus another across the event types. Next slide. So for years now, asset managers have been drawing at least probably graphs that look similar to this, but not maybe exactly this. But the point is, to be able to do good investment analysis usually involves looking at performance versus the investment made. Cumulative investment made in a given asset class is fairly traditional. And the time horizon on this performance might be 10 years out, for example, if we're talking about highways. But usually involving trade-offs in investing in one asset class versus another, setting targets, and being able to consider points of diminishing return of more and more investing in a given asset class versus another asset class that might be on the high return on investment slope of their curve. So being able to make those investment decisions and consider time frames. And so this picture has to do with an asset performance focus. And as I mentioned, traditional performance-based investment analysis is what we're looking at right here. So the next slide talks about adding risk considerations to that investment analysis, and that is comprehensive asset management. Perhaps the goal should be to consider all investment opportunities and not just consider them all, but consider them together. And that is being able to use some of the analysis and information that I've discussed so far should help in terms of enabling bringing together not only the analysis of investments in risk-based opportunities themselves, but to be able to compare them on par with performance-based analysis. So please contact me if you'd like to discuss this further. Last slide that I have. You know, I started out by talking about, pretty much the general ISO process for risk management. And what I've added here in this slide are just my suggested list of major steps. And it's in my own language or terminology, so I thought I'd provide it here. But it's similar to the list on the first slide I showed. But it covers the things we've talked about here today. What are some of the nuances of identifying risk types and dealing with the extremes in probabilities and the types of impacts that might result from a given risk event, the importance of building a risk register and how far it can be extended and used as a basis for leaping off into system risk analysis, packaging solutions, and dealing with various other types of issues. Some of the parameters of defining strategies and their costs and their benefits are important in terms of the next two steps, which are how to package those solutions and how to evaluate and eventually select them. So that's pretty much what I've got, and I'll stand by for questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larry. That was a great overview of risk management in general and how it applies to the asset management planning process. Now I'd like to move to discussion of a specific type of risk regarding drivers. So with over 30,000 fatal crashes being recorded in the United States in 2012, operating a motor vehicle is an area where a solid risk management plan and strategy can be very effective. The biggest challenge with managing driver risk is, of course, that you're in the office and the drivers are on the roads. While it's critical to have your drivers sign off on your organization's vehicle use policies so they are clear on what is unacceptable use, such as using a cell phone while driving or speeding or et cetera, versus acceptable use, it can be difficult to track and enforce those policies. Smart use of technology and strategic partnerships within your organization can help with managing driver risks. For example, a partnership between a risk manager and the fleet department can be used to leverage GPS technology for the benefit of both parties. The addition of GPS and telematics technology allows organizations to actively manage and decrease driver risks. Usually, fleet managers are interested in GPS technology for the benefits it can provide for maintenance programs such as accurate odometer readings and vehicle fault notifications. Data from GPS devices can be collected, evaluated, and used to track and identify how the vehicle is performing, which is extremely useful for the fleet department. However, some of this data can also be used by risk management and operating departments to assess how the vehicle is being operated by tracking events such as hard braking, excessive acceleration, and speeding. By correlating this driver behavior data with GPS location information, an analysis can be done to estimate what driver behaviors outside the norm are potential risk factors. Functionality that commonly comes with a GPS system and can be used to mitigate driver risk includes G-force events, which measure excessive acceleration, braking, and swerving, speed alerts when a vehicle exceeds a speed threshold set by your organization, speed alerts based on drivers exceeding the posted speed limit, geofencing, which can monitor activity within a specific area, such as a yard or a work zone, and unauthorized vehicle use. Now, a driver scorecard is a great tool that can provide the information you need to address and retrain problem drivers to decrease risk within your organization. Scorecard data can also be used to set department policies and provide realistic goals for drivers, such as never exceeding a posted speed limit. A scorecard also allows you to track and measure adherence to these policies and goals to aid in your risk management planning. An additional benefit of driver scorecards is that fleet managers can also use a driver scorecard to show their user departments how poor driver behaviors can cost the entire organization money. The scorecard can also be used to justify the costs the fleet department has to charge for maintenance for activities. At the same time, a scorecard allows fleet managers to point out how much the organization could potentially be saving on maintenance costs, fuel usage, and vehicle replacement by altering how the vehicles are operated by their drivers. So next up, we'll talk about a few different potential risk mitigation and management tools. One area of risk mitigation is safety management. The workplace needs to be safe. People need the necessary training, certifications, and personal protective equipment to perform their jobs safely. And if something does happen, there needs to be a resolution to that event. Are you required to track all of this? Do you have a separate department of staff who do this tracking and enforcement, or is it left up to individual managers or supervisors? Do you have a software system now to track and report on this information, or do you do it by paper and spreadsheets? few questions to think about there. For broader incidents, what if your organization's vehicle is involved in an accident? What if someone from the public crashes into a guardrail, a sign, and a light pole, causing damage to several assets owned and managed by your organization? Are you required to record and report on this information? How do you manage the work required to get the assets whole again? How do you manage the communication for all the parties involved? If someone outside your organization was responsible for the damage, are you able to recover any of your costs through insurance claims? And do you have a software system now to track and report on this information, or do you do it by paper and spreadsheets? Okay. For broader emergency management, when something does happen, such as a mudslide or a major weather event, is your organization the one responsible for coordinating the cleanup and helping the people affected by the event? What if you need to borrow or rent specialized equipment for an extended period of time to assist in that cleanup effort? How do you keep track of what you have, and from where did it come, and who is it from? Where is it now, and who's responsible for the maintenance on that? Are you responsible for the maintenance on that, or is the party who provided the equipment responsible for that maintenance? And how do you make sure that that stays up to date throughout the time that you actually have that equipment? How do you ensure that you're tracking all of your costs involved to support potential FEMA reimbursements? And do you have a software system now to track and report all of this information, or is that, again, by paper and spreadsheets? Okay. So I hope we have given you plenty of food for thought today regarding risk management, how it affects your asset management plan, and some potential tools for mitigating and managing risks. I'd like to turn it back over to Rick for our question and answer session.
Thanks, Kelly. We do have a few questions that have come in, so I was hoping to just send them your way now, and hopefully we can answer them to the best of our ability. So first, one of our attendees had asked, when creating a risk management strategy, should there be a focus on risk management as a standalone concept, or is it something that should be included in all of our management processes?
Larry?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it gets to the spirit of MAP 21 and TAMP planning, and that is, I've kind of thought of things in two categories that I think the question might even be implying, and that is risks on their own, that is individual threats to the mission of the organization, and they're important to consider on their own. There may be ways to package them as to how they interrelate and where they are geographically and those kinds of things. Then there's risks to, and I didn't mean to say that, like for instance in pavement management or pavement analysis, that uncertainty isn't important. It is, and the ability to have good, credible data is very important, and there's risks involved in that, in the science, in the data itself, and so forth. And so there's risks in our performance management systems that go into our performance management systems that also have to be considered, and there's risks everywhere. So I've kind of put them into those two categories that, you know, that even the numbers that we arrive at in performance management still have uncertainties associated with them. And that's why you employ things like strategic management of the entire operation, and that is when you set targets and when you set performance targets that are associated with the investments that you've decided to make in the next several years. That's why it's important to look back and say, were our theories about structures and bridges and other things, traffic and so forth, true or close to being true, and did our analysis really predict how long our roads did last, and if not, then we need to readjust our methods, our targets, and everything associated with the planning analysis. So, yeah, that's a great question, and all of the above, I believe, should factor into comprehensive asset management.
Okay, thank you, Larry. We do have another question from one of our guests here, and Larry, I suppose if you had to say, would you say that risk management is more related to assets such as equipment or facilities, or would you say that perhaps it's more related to events such as floods, fires, traffic congestion, et cetera?
Well, it's all about the phenomena. It's all about things that could occur. It's about events that could plague anything, the infrastructure, your operations, your information. It's really all of the above. It's threats that could happen. And anytime you think of your business, whatever your business is, your program or the project that you are on the hook for delivering or the agency that you run, it's all those uncertainties that could affect your success that are usually affected by events all the way from political to climate to failures, structural failures, anything that can be defined as an event that involves uncertainty, that is a threat to your business, whatever level it is a risk. And until you know its magnitude in terms of threat and impact, it should be on the list to consider.
Okay, thanks again, Larry. And we do have another question here. Are there any special areas of funding that can be used to address risk management?
I think there's an ER out of, I don't exactly know a lot about that bucket of money, but is that emergency response? I'm not too familiar with it, but I believe some people point to that as being one source of funding. I'm not real versed on some of those types of things.
Okay. All right. Well, great stuff, both Kelly and Larry. Excellent job. And at this time, I would like to thank all of our attendees again for taking the time to attend today's presentation. Hopefully, you've all secured some valuable takeaways to keep in mind moving forward. Larry, I would also like to thank you one last time on behalf of AssetWorks for sharing your expertise with everyone today. And as you can see on the screen right now, there is contact information available should any of you have any follow-up questions or concerns that you want to direct to either Larry or Kelly. Also, we will be posting the links to this webinar recording on our support site, so be sure to check that out, as well as our newsletter for future webinar information. Thank you once again all for attending today. Kelly, Larry, and I will be sticking around for another few minutes in case any of you have any questions, but otherwise, have a great day. We look forward to having you with us next